Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is a fun one. For this, we're going to be doing a little bit of a cosplay build. We're going to be doing Count Dooku from Star Wars. This is a really interesting and fun build that a lot of people asked for. Generally speaking, a Star Wars build, Count Dooku was really fun to do. Let's get into the details. So first up, before we get into any build details, and this is a build for the Bloody Helice as well, we used a character creation that I left in the description below. It's a really good one for Count Dooku, and it came out really well. It looks awesome. So I figured, and pretty much everybody else I talked to, that the best suggestion to go with was the Bloody Helice because the weapon art really fits him and the style of thrusting in general fits his lightsaber, so it kind of fits him to a T, and specifically, the Ash of War looks very much like something Count Dooku would do. Now, the Bloody Helice's Ash of War is really fun to use. It actually has several different things you can do with it by using it multiple times. For me, in this fight with Radahn, I'm on New Game Plus 7 here. I avoided the follow-up attacks for the most part because it was just easier to get the poke than roll out back into the invincibility frames that the Ash of War gives you. And those invincibility frames are very good for the Bloody Helice. Obviously, it's used in PvP a fair bit. You do get a good dodge window with its Ash of War. And again, no doubt it took a second to get used to the Ash of War because it is a little bit fluky, much like Eleanor's Pole Blade, but once you get used to it, having that dodge window and then a follow-up attack, it's basically a variant on Bloodhound's Fang with, I think, a little bit more invincibility frames. And the attack and follow-up and everything preceding it seems to be boosted by the Shard of Alexander. I tested this, so it's a very, very good talisman to use for this build. Now, back to Count Dooku himself. Now, for him, I ended up using, and I'm going to go over the armor and equipment that I chose to use, but I wanted to use, generally speaking, a cloak, so I went with Alberic's, however you say his name, his robe, and then we went with the bandit boots, and then everything else really is up to you as far as the rest of it goes, but I did want a cool cloak and that kind of just general Sith vibe that you can get from something like this, and then obviously with the heavy thrusting sword, it really fits him to a T. Now, here you're going to see me use claws on my character beforehand. This is where you get the Bloody Helice. I'm going to show it on the map here in a second. If you didn't know where to get it, it's in these ruins in Altus. I always say that wrong, Altus Plateau. And it's going to be right here, and I'll show you on the map in a second where you receive the Bloody Helice. It's not a very tough boss to fight. As you can see, I took him down easy, and there it is on the map right there in the Altus Plateau, and that's where you get the Bloody Helice. If you want to add some lightning to your build, you can grab the basic Dragon Cult incantations. If you didn't know where this is, it's a knight that's in Liurnia of the Lakes. I'm going to show this on the map as well. And that's going to give us stuff like Lightning Spear or Hone Bolt that you can throw in to use lightning powers as well and make your build a little bit more fun and a little bit more versatile. It's something really interesting to do with this build because it fits the theme. There it is on the map in Liurnia of the Lakes, and that's where you get it from the knight that drops it there. Now we can once again get back to Count Dooku himself. Now Count Dooku, as I mentioned, the armor I'll go over when I go over stats, equipment, everything as far as the build goes. As far as the Bloody Helice itself, we came up with a decent build for it. It's a pretty good weapon as far as the weapon art goes. It's definitely something that's useful for counterattacks and whatnot. And having that follow-up animation and that double follow-up animation is really good. And then of course, like anything in Eldenring, anything that has bleed on it is bound to be decent, right? I mean, aside from Vare's Bouquet, it's a pretty good weapon. And once again, it fits his theme of general thrusting, and it definitely is something, for me, when I look at it, it has that Count Dooku vibe. It was also really fun to use this weapon too because I didn't really use the Bloody Helice very often. It wasn't something that I used often, so I had to totally learn the weapon art, learn the weapon itself. I don't use heavy thrusting swords that much, but they are quite powerful when utilized properly, obviously. And with the follow-up animation and stuff, you're able to get those invincibility frames and then a lot of damage out of it. And obviously the bleed build-up too is fairly good on it as well, coming in at close to 100. Now, because I didn't know the weapon art that well, and I spent a lot of this video learning the weapon art, it was something to get used to, and it did take me a minute. I did get beat up a little bit, but again, it was really fun to cosplay as a character. I like these types of builds because they're interesting. They give me a little bit of a challenge to do, and it's something fun to put together, especially if you're a Star Wars fan in the sense of Count Dooku, where it comes out looking a lot like him. The build itself looks a lot like him. It fits his style. It fits his vibe. And most importantly, it was fun to do. These are really fun to do as far as cosplay builds. They're definitely entertaining to mix it up and do these every once in a while. Speaking of fun things, by the way, we're doing challenges, weekly challenges on the Discord. This week's challenge is to cosplay as any character pretty much from anything and beat a boss. So definitely participate in that and be sure to join the Discord. And if you're not subbed to this channel, definitely hit that subscribe button if you want awesome Elden Ring builds. We're going to continue moving forward with this. And let's get back to Count Dooku and all the fun that was had with this build. And again, don't mind me getting beat up by the dragon here, but this was something for me to get used to. And interestingly enough, tomorrow I'm doing a whip build. Whip builds and thrusting weapons in general, all together I probably have a couple hours in both categories, which is crazy for the amount of time I played the game, but it's just something that I don't use very often. Now on to mobs. Now, for the lightning powers in general, I went with Lightning Spear because it has a low stat requirement, but if I were a higher level character, I did this on a 150 character, and the thrusting sword we're using, the Bloody Helice, requires Dex and Arcane for the most part. For this, if you're a really high level, you should go with Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. I think it fits the theme more. As far as me, I went for Lightning Spear to mimic the lightning powers because it was a low stat requirement, and it's something I could do at a range as well. And again, that part really is up to the user, what you want to throw in as far as incantations and whatnot. For me personally, though, I really like being able to use the Bloody Helice and then throwing in something like Lightning Spear just to use as a ranged attack in general and just to have fun with the build because, again, this was one of the more fun builds that I've done lately. Cosplay builds are fun in general, and being able to play as Count Dooku, especially being able to get my character to look like Count Dooku, that was pretty awesome in general. He definitely has the Count Dooku vibe, no doubt about it. So as far as the Bloody Helice itself, obviously we know it's used a lot in PvP because of the fact that you get the invincibility frames, but the thrusting follow-up again is boosted by the Shard of Alexander, and it does a lot of damage in general. As you can see with the follow-up and everything, it's just really on target. This is something that's really powerful when it comes to NPC invaders, when it comes to PvP, and when it comes to a lot of regular enemies in the game. This is a really awesome Ash of War to use. I'm going to show, by the way, how to use the follow-up, how to use the entire animation on the Ash of War here shortly. And before we do that, before we go over everything in its entirety, let's go over equipment. For equipment, we have the Bloody Helice, preferably +10, any seal will do. We're using Alberic's robes, and then we have the Champion bracers, and then I went with the Bandit boots to give it the best look that I could come up with. And then for the weapon itself, Lord of Blood's Exultation for the bleed, Axe Talisman for charged attacks. I'm not sure if it boosts the follow-up, Shard of Alexander, Dragoncrest, and then we went with the Faith tier, I think, for buffs as well as the Charge tier, or you can use something like the Successive Attack tier as well. Let's get into stats now for this build. As far as stats go, this weapon has a B in Arcane, so we went with 45 Arcane to soft cap that, and then I put the rest of the points in Dexterity. After that, you're going to want a decent amount of Vigor with this build because you may trade here and there, though the invincibility frames are nice. Everything else really, though, is up to you. You do need 16 Strength as well to use the weapon. I say need if you're doing the cosplay because Count Dooku would only have one hand on his lightsaber, typically speaking, so it would make sense for you to have one hand on also. I used one hand for a lot of the video. You can obviously two-hand it, though, for more damage, and then obviously you need less strength as well to two-hand it. Let's get into buffs. First, we drink our tier, and then we're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, and then we're going to tap her off our FP. And as far as the weapon art goes, I'm on Xbox. You're going to use L2 first, and then R2 twice. You're going to get a thrusting animation, and then you get additional thrust with kind of a swipe. All of that, by the way, from my knowledge and testing, is boosted by the Shard of Alexander because it is a weapon skill. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope this was a fun one. This was an entertaining one for me to run around as Count Dooku. It was really entertaining to throw this together. I really liked how the armor came out. The Bloody Helice fits him, and then you can throw in something like Lightning Spear also to add to the build, or Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike if you're high enough level. If you're not on the Discord, by the way, be sure to join the Discord. There's a ton of people on there. I started a Patreon too if you want to support the channel even further. If you love overpowered PvE builds or Elden Ring content in general, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on the channel. Thanks for watching. As always, I will catch you guys there.